Hi, Morris. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah, and today is far more interesting. No, we cannot say that because the last time I learned about Shelton computer. What was it? Shelton?
That's right. It was a Signet. The make was Signet. Signet Shell.
Signet, exactly. So I never heard about that.
Yeah.
And
I can
today,
hear in my flat.
yeah, and today we will exclusively talk about Java. Or
Okay.
more, not exclusively, but you said you started with Java and you were really excited about Java,
Mhm.
which is remarkable with your background. And this is also what I noticed. Lots of my guests, they were extremely low level assembly programmers, C, and all of them love Java. And I would assume rather that Java would be more appealing to Visual Basic developers, not necessarily to low level coders, but this is other way around, which I found surprising. But yeah,
Why would you think that? I mean,
yeah, because Java is high level, right? So there is no pointers, no fiddling. So you are somehow it's a boring language. So it just works if you use that, but you cannot do funniest things like in C assembly or whatever. And this is similar to Visual Basic or Basic, I would say, right? So from the conceptual point of view.
no, I mean, I think you're probably right, but that doesn't work with me because by the time by the time Java came along, I was long removed from assembler programming. And although I had always, once I understood assembler, and once I understood that that it was basically machine language, I was really excited about that for a long time. But the long time didn't last forever, and I was introduced to high level languages. After 3 years of working on assembler, I got a job which was working with a variant of Algol 68, which I still think, well, I've forgotten it now, but I thought was a great language at the time. And so from then onwards, I was a high level language person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just to recap, what was your first contact with Java?
My first contact with Java was when I was actually unemployed at the time. I'd given up my safety related job in London. I was in Edinburgh trying to start some kind of a multimedia oriented business. But I knew that I was going to, but I could see that getting that off the ground was going to take some time. In the end, it took an infinite amount of time, and therefore I had to make a living in the meantime, and off the skills that I knew. And one of the best skill that I had was programming. So I was looking for a language that I could teach programs, that I could learn. I programmed the project in Java because I was still very keen to program everything, and then knowing it was very popular, and so doing training became a kind of very obvious thing to do to make other things developed.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out took forever.
So you started with training. So
I started with coding for this multimedia project. I wrote quite a lot of Java code, and then at that point, I was training in all kinds of things. I was training in Unix. And
what was the multimedia project? Was it the CD distribution? What we talked about last time?
Yes, it was. It was based on CD distribution. It was going to be a local information project.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where are the restaurants? Find them on a map. When are they open? What shops are there? Where can I buy such and such? Just the kind of thing we take for granted now, but which was rocket science then.
Okay, so you started with JDK 1.2, I remember, right? With the multimedia system?
No, I didn't. I cannot remember how much. I'm pretty confident that I started with JDK 1.0.
Wow.
I certainly did have. I'm always very keen to throw out old things. I'm really trying to declutter my apartment, which is very cluttered. And so a while back, in a fit of throwing things out, I threw out Java in a nutshell for 1.0, and then immediately regretted it because, like, this was such an extraordinary book. If I had a nutshell book for 1.0, then I must have been programming in 1.0. But I don't really remember anything before 1.1. So I think I came in late just before 1.1 launched.
There were two books. This was from David Flanagan, Java in a Nutshell, and the other one was Java in a Nutshell Workshop, I remember, with lots of code examples.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because in the code example, even there was a Zocket server or something. So this was a really interesting code, not just hello world or whatever. It was actually useful.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, maybe, but I didn't use it. But I do remember one point the nutshell book for 1.0, which had, I'm pretty confident, 6 packages and 100 and something classes
Mhm.
in 1.0. I'm really confident about the 6 packages, and then, but I remember the 1.1 book better. Yeah, and it was already significantly thicker, and of course, by the time of 1.2, Java was like a kind of really usable language by then,
Mhm.
with libraries that you could actually really make.
Yeah, JDK 1.2 came with Swing, which was huge, for instance, right? So this was
Yeah,
collections also arrived.
yeah, collections. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what happened after multimedia project? So multimedia project was semi-successful because you overestimated the power of internet, or no, overestimated the power of CDs and
Yeah,
underestimated the power
no.
of internet,
Well,
right?
yeah. Well, I mean, since they were opposed, I underestimated the power of the internet. I
Exactly.
underestimated the speed at which transmission speeds would increase. I mean, for a long time they were very slow, and I have memories of maybe I was influenced by in an earlier existence trying to do remote computing over an acoustic coupler
Uh-huh.
in a country area where the phone lines were really dirty. It was a very, very frustrating business. And the acoustic coupler that I was using, there was a theorem prover at Edinburgh University, which was in intensive use during the day. So I'd get up really early in the morning and try and log in from my cottage in the Scottish countryside using an acoustic coupler, which your listeners will not remember what an acoustic coupler is, but I can briefly enlighten them. When you had telephones with separate microphones and loudspeakers, the acoustic coupler was a kind of device which clamped over this headset and matched the microphone on the headset with a speaker, and matched the speaker on the headset with a microphone. So it was like a very primitive kind of modem. And this was just the most frustrating thing in the world to use. And the thing that nobody could believe is that the line speed was 300 baud.
Mhm.
300.
So the acoustic coupler was with the rubber, right? And these were like 2 rubber cushions where
Yeah,
they fit perfectly.
two rubber
And
cushions.
I think it was in the movie War Games, right?
I don't remember it in a
There's an
movie.
old movie about I think a boy who hacked something in Pentagon, and
Yeah.
they used
Yeah.
acoustic. This is a very old movie. Scotland, you said. So you're a Highlander, right? You from
Well,
the movie.
I was living on the edge of the Highlands at the time. I'm in Edinburgh now.
Ah, you know the movie Highlander? Of course you know, right? There can be only one Singleton.
I know of it. I haven't seen it. Sorry.
Ah, okay. So there was like the main hero. There could be only one Highlander. So sometimes in my early Java courses, I said, okay, Highlander is a singleton because can be only one, right? So, and you are the living Highlander. So it was a superhero, strong man. I don't know, forgot the plot, but well, lots of fighting with back then. Yeah.
Yeah, but so anyway, these trying to do anything over a 300 baud.
One question unrelated to your cottage in Scotland. Was it a beautiful landscape? Was it
beautiful? Absolutely, yeah, extraordinarily lovely. Yes,
Uh-huh.
I really loved living in the Scottish countryside.
Okay.
And when I had to move to Edinburgh, I was really upset about it, family reasons, and then I got used to it. And Edinburgh is actually a great place to live.
But Edinburgh is also beautiful, right?
Yeah, it is beautiful. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, this is now many years ago, but the Scottish countryside is just fabulous. I mean,
Okay. And if someone would like to visit Scotland, what do you would suggest? Something so really like just fun landscape, not like tourists. So
well, the best landscape, in my opinion, is I mean, I guess in most people's opinion, is along the west coast, anywhere north of Glasgow. The west coast is quite mountainous and very beautiful.
North of Glasgow. Okay.
Yeah, but roughly speaking, I was living slightly northeast of Glasgow and on the edge of the Highlands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened? So you started to.
So there was beautiful views there, but very, very poor network connection. 300 baud, and just talking to you now, I think that I might have been really influenced by the frustration of the experience of trying to do this, because over a dirty line, it was agonizingly slow and very often dropped out. So I remember being practically in tears trying to get stuff done with this. And I think probably because of that, I came to believe that. I mean, that might have been in the background of my mind that network connections weren't going to be a practical way of getting a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
And that might have led to my belief that we'd be using CDs for distribution for a long time. Yeah. So anyway, that project kind of really didn't move very fast, and I had to make some money, and I started training. I trained in Unix, as I said, and for a while I trained. I mean, I also knew stuff about the Windows operating system, but Java took over pretty rapidly as being the main market for training. And by that time, I already knew some Java, and I'm afraid that I have very unpleasant memories of my first Java training course, which was in Sweden, which was a car crash. I didn't have very many car crashes in my training career, but I remember them pretty well. And this one, I really did not know enough. And at the end of it, the training house that I was training for, that I was working for, said, "Well, we'll give you another chance, but maybe Java isn't for you." So that was my introduction to teaching Java. It was probably a pretty close run thing, but I did get better after that.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so you were a teacher, but what was your next project?
After that, I worked. Let me see. I've worked at different times. Most of the time, I've been training. So I think I've had no commercial projects of my own after that. But I've worked on various, as architect or as designer on various projects in the same kind of way. I think as you were saying, you would come in as a designer and you'd end up doing a lot of coding. And I did that for a while. I worked for a large retailer, now I'm afraid defunct, converting their system. They had a green screen system on mainframes, and they wanted to change that to a more modern Java system. So I knew enough about Java to help them with that. And I worked for a while on for the British the Department of Health and Social Security here, where they were working. Now they had a system designed for, this is kind of interesting in a historical way, because they had a system which was designed to help people in call centers to navigate through the fantastically complicated benefits system. Somebody would call in and they would say, "Well, like I'm looking after my aged parent, and I am myself disabled, and I live in a house with 2 bedrooms," and they would be navigated through the system on a really the call center operators would have this really complicated system that would navigate them through the. It was so complicated that it had I think thousands of screens, each screen consisting of a lot of choices that you would work your way through to decide. There was a whole area of it that was set aside particularly for people who were refugees from the Soufriere Hills volcano eruption of the early 21st century, when in the West Indies, there's an island in the West Indies where there was a volcanic eruption, and many of the people had to come to live in Britain. And there was a special section of this system that was designed for that.
And this was a Java applets based, or what was it?
Well, the interesting thing about this was that it was based on IBM Visual Age.
Okay. Visual Age for Java.
The visual programming system. And I really liked the idea of this. You would link up the components on the screen with lines that joined them. And this actually was a predecessor of Eclipse. Eclipse was based on
exactly.
This. And when I first met this, you sound like you know about it.
Yes, but what I liked about Visual, there's a Visual Age for Java. It was based on a repository, so there was, and you were never able to see the entire source code. So you can click on methods, and you saw just the methods, and it compiled from a database. So it was an interesting approach. And what I liked is the look and feel. It looked like somehow beautiful. Actually, it reminds me on a little bit right now AI generated art. So so brown color something. So it was it was nice. And I had to do, for back then, it was around 2000, for insurance company UI with that. So I used the Visual Builder a lot, and we combined the Visual Builder with it was a Swing with controllers, and we communicated with IBM host. So this was my and you are absolutely right. So this Visual H for Java was predecessor to Eclipse. So Eclipse came 2 years later and basically killed everything, because Eclipse was very strong with refactoring, as Visual H for Java was. Because Visual H for Java had a repository, a database, it could refactor easily. JBuild and the others, they had hard time with refactoring. You couldn't back then easily rename a method, for instance, right?
Well, we obviously are remembering the same system, but we have different impressions of it. I thought Visual H for Java was a great idea, but I thought in practice it was really unusable. And my memory of it is that an awful lot of the your understanding, I mean, your cognitive model of a screen would be based on the visual connections between the components. But because every possible interaction between the components was represented by a line on the screen, you would end up with a screen that was simply there was such a network, such a spider's web, really a visual depiction of spaghetti coding.
Yes.
That just completely obscured the screen. I mean, it was impossible to gain an intuitive understanding of what was going on. And because, as you say, you could never actually see the code properly, it was extremely difficult to work with. And I do remember how I got the job.
But what we did differently, we used the Visual Builder, not only we, actually the entire company, and it worked well without the errors. So we only used, the visual composition of the views, and then we switched the code mode and coded, the connections. This was possible. So we didn't use the event handling with that. So we had a clear
event handling at all.
We implemented MVC, Model View Controller, with Visual H for Java. And as I remember, even we had a specific Swing layout manager to work better. And we could very quickly align, actually. We can very quickly create the views, and the views came from the business department. So it worked well, but without the errors. So I was interested in the errors, but we didn't use them.
I think that sounds like a really good decision. Well, by the time I came into this project, it was pretty well advanced, and this was what they were doing. And in fact, the way I got the job was I had already worked with it for, I think, some bank consultancy that I did for a while, and the hiring manager said to me, who was also the team leader on the project, he said to me, "You worked with this before?" And I said yes, and he said, "Well, what do you think of it?" And I said, "Well, I really didn't like it very much. I think I was probably a bit more pronounced than that." And it was on that basis that he gave me the job, because everybody else who said that they'd worked with it said, "Oh, it's wonderful." And he thought, "You haven't really worked with it." So that's how I got it. I hated it. Right, you were hired to work on it. So it was a sort of punishment for having passed the interview.
What I didn't like about that, I wanted to see the entire source code. So what I remember, I printed sometimes the entire Java class, because it was really hard for me just to see one method. I wanted to scroll quickly. This is what I really hated. So this was what I didn't like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's I guess the engagement that stands out most in my memory. So I did.
And what was in the backend? It was WebSphere, or what was it? This was the Swing with Visual Builder with Visual H for Java. Now the question, was it a FET client? Or you communicated? Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Now that I don't remember, because I worked entirely on the front end. So what was going on at the back end? I would have to struggle to try to recall that.
Because the interesting part in my case, the front end communicated with the back end via IBM MQ series. So it was fully asynchronous system, and we had a connection with queues. So there was an abstraction layer. Yeah. And at the back end, there was a transition. So there was a RPG programming language. And what they did, they read the queues, the messages from the queue, and they communicated with DB2 database. So they did something. So we are not allowed to directly call the DB2 database. Then we received the message, which was pushed to the UI and was asynchronously applied. So this was actually interesting, because this was modern architecture with old stuff, because asynchronous, nothing blocked. It was fully asynchronous. It was MVC, and and to this day, I would like to take a look at the Visual Age for Java once again, because I like the design somehow. I remember rounded buttons, and this was completely different to the all other IDEs. So back then, I used Semantic Visual Cafe, JBuilder, Visual Age for Java. I always wanted to use Code Warrior from MetroWorks, but I never was able to. So I just wanted to try as many IDEs as possible. So this was my mission back then. I just liked them.
Right. And now, how many do you use?
Now I'm using the entire time Visual Studio Code, actually.
Sorry?
Visual Studio Code, VSC. This
really?
Yeah, it is a free one. It is you can just download that. The reason being is back then I used NetBeans a long time, and after Visual Age for Java. Okay, so my IDE story is the very first one was Visual J++, because it was able to get it cheaper from Microsoft as a student, I guess. Yeah, it was like for 100 euro, you got everything. And also funny story. The next one, or maybe earlier, was Sun Java Workshop. And this was funny story. I told it a long time ago at this podcast, because in order to buy the Sun Java Workshop, Sun Java Studio and Workshop were both, you had to be a Sun customer. And they said, okay, no, then I would like to, then let's become a Sun customer. So I called them, so I go, look, I would like to buy this tool. And in order to buy this tool, I have to be a Sun customer. So, and nothing happens. A few weeks later, I got a call from Sun management. So I was a little bit afraid. And so, but it went well. And then I got a thick book. It was a beautiful book from Sun Microsystems with all the servers and whatever. And it's okay. And I got the books all the time, actually. I remember I had lots of such books as well, the catalogs, with all the servers and so forth. And then I ordered, actually, the IDE. So I got the CDs. And it worked. I enjoyed both. So I didn't use them, I think, in projects, but for my private project, I use them all the time. And then I found out what I became. I became an Sun client or customer, and I could actually order, as a student, a large servers. So actually, this allowed me, this buying of this IDE, to just order servers. I just like, why? And I just look at this. It's like I could actually order right now, without any money, whatever, and I will pay later, whatever. So this was actually a funny experience. And then I had some questions to Sun Microsystems about the IDE, because something didn't work, and there was a huge conference back then in Germany. It's called Systems. So I went to the Sun booth and asked them, I have some questions. And at the booth there was a guy. It was a manager from Siemens, and say, oh, you know about this? Like, yes. And then I got another project. So this was interesting, actually, time back then. So this was my first one. And then JBuilder, I used commercial projects in JBuilder, but commercial projects for me is not like I started the projects, commercial for my clients, So not like I never never created a product. I just worked for clients. And JBuilder, I enjoyed a lot JBuilder. So we did a lot with JBuilder Professional, and also look at the enterprise. And JBuilder, and then I killed all JBuilders with Eclipse, basically. So Eclipse was the way to go because of refactoring. But then I dropped Eclipse, and the reason being is there were lots of plugins. So all my clients use different set of plugins, which was crazy. So in Germany, we even had Eclipse distributions. So there were different distributions which were not compatible to each other. It's like, this is craziness. And then I started to use NetBeans, and I really enjoyed NetBeans all the time. And recently, I switched to Visual Studio Code. So recently, 3 years maybe. And reason being is I also do some JavaScript. And Visual Studio Code is just perfect in all the languages. And it seems like it is the new standard. And actually, reasons are the same as the NetBeans. If I start a new project, I can tell developers just download, Visual Studio Code. And after 5 minutes, you are as productive as, whether I'm productive or not, but you get the same experience as I have. And you know Visual Studio Code?
Well, I know of it, but I'm interested to hear this huge variety that you've gone through, and you've never mentioned IntelliJ.
Yeah, I have IntelliJ license, so I used IntelliJ a bit. The problem with IntelliJ, it was commercial from the beginning, and what I didn't want it to do is to come in a project and say buy license first and then we go, right? Because back then everyone had Eclipse, and in some companies, such a thing like getting approved €200 will take months.
Yeah.
So for me, it was whatever was commercial for development was for practical reasons was not necessary. And I would say Visual Studio Code is for me good enough. So I'm really productive. But I like IntelliJ a lot actually. So I like IntelliJ I use less because of Visual Studio Code, but they Data Grip is great. They have new documentation product. I forgot what it is. So I try a lot and I took a look what happens there. But Visual Studio Code is huge outside of Java as well. And and if you take a look at Fleet, for instance, from Visual Studio from IntelliJ folks, this Fleet looks like Visual Studio Code. So I would say the next IDE from JetBrains, I think will look like Visual Studio Code anyway. So the question is, if it's good enough for me, why? But I have the subscription. So I have so I pay for licenses. But in commercial projects I use Visual Studio Code.
The community edition of IntelliJ, I think, is I don't use the community edition.
Yeah.
I only have the ultimate, but I think the community edition is good for a lot of things, and that's free. And that is free.
Yeah, but there are some limitations which I forgot. But Visual Studio Code, for instance, I use a lot with AWS, for instance, tooling, right? And everything is already in Visual Studio Code. Then if you use the recent LLMs like Cursor, is the new hot IDE, is based on Visual Studio Code. So I would say whatever is very, very recent, I like to try things out. They are based on Visual Studio Code. And IntelliJ comes a little bit later. It's not a problem for commercial projects, but it's a problem for me. And
right.
And what I do maybe it's also interesting for listeners. I use Visual Studio Code, and there are two possibilities to use that. Because if you just download, there is no Java. So if you download the Visual Studio Code, you need the language server. There are two actually. That's really interesting. One is from Oracle, so you get the recent Java support, but the refactoring is not as good. And the other one is actually from Microsoft. And if you download the Microsoft, you get the Red Hat. They are cooperating. So Microsoft Red Hat is the same runtime, and you get pretty decent refactoring and debugging, integration, and so forth. And I had on my podcast a session with the J Profiler guys, and they also have now created a profiler for Visual Studio Code. So for me, it is a complete environment. This is customizable, and it seems like the future because the entire ecosystem is larger than Java, and also what I do. This is maybe it's too much about me, but what I do, I record.
I'm very interested to hear it.
Record daily shorts, for instance. This is just on YouTube, so there are almost 1,000 of them right now. So I do this for 3 years. And if I would use IntelliJ, I go to the criticism, Java is bloated, you need a specific editor. But what I do nothing. I have nothing. I just Visual Studio Code, and I use Java C from the command line to show how it works. Sure. And there are no argument against that. What I would like to show is actually how easy Java actually is. Mm-hmm. And for that, I think whatever is powerful, IDEs are counterproductive. So
sure.
That's all, and small things like Visual Studio Code, for instance, there are plugins for various, out of the box for various Markdown and whatever. This is like very similar to Eclipse back then. Similar story. I would say Eclipse is Visual Studio Code and IntelliJ is JBuilder, something like this. Or yeah.
Right.
Try it for teaching, because I got some. I mean, if you just try it out, you have at least can. If someone asks you, you can say, okay, this Visual Studio Code is good for that, and IntelliJ is of course more powerful, more refactors, whatever. But yeah,
no, you've done a great sales job. I definitely will look at it. It's funny, like there was. I mean, you'll remember back in the day the war between Sun and Microsoft over Java, and I still have, I've never really. I mean, obviously, I know that things have changed enormously since then. But I still kind of have a bit that feeling. Like Microsoft is. I still have to modernize my view of Microsoft.
Microsoft changed completely. So I would go.
I know they did. I know.
I go that far. For me, Microsoft will be even the new Sun, kind of. Because if you take a look, lots of Sun people are working on Microsoft. Satya Nadella is actually a Microsoft guy, Sun Microsystems guy. He worked at Sun back then.
I did not know that.
And the Visual Studio Code is in Microsoft inside is open source first. They try to do that, and why this works, because they earn a lot of money with Azure, with the cloud. They don't care anymore about the IDEs and whatever. Back then, they this was the business, right? So this is actually not like they are now the good guys. This is a good for business being,
sure.
But for us it's good, right? Because the entire ecosystem is open, and there are lots of interesting. We have Visual Studio Code. There's some testing framework called Playwright, for instance, that nothing to do with Java, but comes from Microsoft, and they're also gaining momentum. So it's, I would say, really similar to Sun Microsystems back then. I still remember the wars back then, but these times are over, right? So yeah.
Yes, yeah, they really are. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, cool. But actually, I was curious what you are doing, and so we had this, the Visual Age for Java project with lots of arrows. So you had the arrows. I had no arrow experience, but I was curious in the arrows. So after years, we find out, it was good that I never tried the arrow-driven programming. But with the arrows, I got another experience, which is also arrow-driven. You remember SOA, Service-Oriented Architectures hype?
Yeah.
All the ESBs had a view where you could map, the data transfer object. You could say, okay, this comes from this systems, this is other systems, and they use arrows to map, the attributes. This was the same mess. It's like, forget it. In Java, in 3 minutes, I'm done with your arrows. No one knows what's going on, right? And at the end of the day, you always had to program something. So, the visual programming, in my experience, never worked.
I don't know. I mean, it's a long time since I thought about this. I mean, at one time, I really was. I'm quite a visually oriented person. So for me, diagrams are always very useful for explaining things. And I always want to turn to diagrams. And so I was always very positive about visual programming systems and always looking for something. And that was why when I first came across Visual Age for Java, I thought this is a very cool idea. But I have to say, I've never come across it. I've never actually come across a visual programming system.
So, exactly. I wanted to ask you what worked for you in visual programming. Was this?
Well, I was kind of oriented. I was oriented towards it because, years before that, when I was working on program correctness, I felt like a sort of a visual depiction of the refinement process. I came across the posters for this recently. I was quite keen to make it look nice, and it did look very nice. I did posters for conferences and that sort of thing, and I thought these were pretty good. I wanted things that were going to be diagram oriented, and I had a system there which again it never worked.
But did it ever work for you?
Pardon?
Did it ever work for you?
It did. It worked on a small scale. This is going back a bit. This is like visual refinement, and I didn't use it on any large projects because program proving on large projects on large programs wasn't practical until pretty recently because of the computing power that's required for the theorem provers, and what I was thinking of was actually a much smaller scale. And I just liked the visual nature of it. But it worked for me, and it worked for in developing small programs. But it wasn't going to work on anything big, and I think that's always going to be the limitation of diagram-based systems. Mm-hmm. They're not scalable unless they are unless they have a modular nature and you can compose them nicely. Oh yeah. So another one that I worked on was called state charts. This was devised by Amir Pinwelli in the Technion in Haifa. So state charts, I think they might still be going. And that was a visual system which was sort of like finite state machines, but much enhanced. Mm-hmm. So finite state machines, for example, can't be interrupted. You can't. I mean, there's no idea of flow of control in a finite state system, other than from one state to another. They were thinking about control systems and timers and that sort of thing. The model was a digital watch, which at that time had a variety of controls, and you could switch it between different modes, and you could interrupt its behavior in one mode and make it jump into another. So it connected a variety of finite state machines. And I like these state charts. I'm not sure whether they still...
Funny you say this, because recently I used something similar, and actually it's coming back with the state charts. Mm-hmm. I think it is called persistence or permanent workflows. And if you're interested, there is one podcast recently. You know, of course, son. Do you know Scott McNeely?
I don't know him personally, but I remember him.
Yeah, there's a son from Scott McNeely, and his name is called McNeely.
Uh-huh.
And I did podcast with him, and he has a Java startup.
Right.
Yes, and he has a system called Little Pony. It's open source, and this does such a things. What do you right now? So it's really interesting guy. So we had a chat, and he was a Java 1 at the. You were a Java 1? You have to look the keynote. You watched the keynote. It was a funny moment because their father said, to Colt, or to the audience, Colt is a nice guy, and it would be nice, that he will marry soon because I would like to have some grandkids. This was the keynote, and Colt was really like, oh man, what he said, right? And I said to me, it is actually a Java 1 conference. It's a bad idea to say something like this because there are not a lot of women, So this was actually funny moment. You watch the keynote from Java 1, but look at the system. What he did. It is what he did is actually really smart. He used Kafka persistence to persist the workflow, and he coordinates, external microservices. Like this is very similar to what you said. And in my projects, what I did recently, there's also the reason why for Visual Studio Code, there is a step functions. This is like a workflow in the cloud on AWS, but it is persistent for 1 year. So you can have an action, and it can call, various things in the cloud. And this actually simplifies a lot because you can use that instead of events. So if you have a central workflow, you can call out, whatever, and it waits until it completes, and you see what's going on. This is where the visual representation works great because you really see what happened. There are maybe 20 steps, and you see what happens on the screen, right? But the alternative would be just to use events, and this would be a mess because, you need always 2 events, request and response. And what happens if events that doesn't come, and then you have to somehow document that. But with the visual step functions editor, it also worked great for me. And another example where it worked really well was with NetBeans Matisse GUI builder. So this was the second time. And we also ignored the event handling. But what we did, we draw the UI nicely, and we let generate like hooks. So, if someone pushed a button, so there was a method generated from Matisse, like, save button clicked. So we named this properly. And then we had our own class called, controller. And this class was instantiated, and the generated code delegated every call to our generated class. And this was the separation, and this worked well. Because sometimes, the UI became corrupt, and we just redrawed it quickly, but our code was separated. So this also worked perfectly. Mm-hmm.
That sounds good. I was just looking now to see state charts. This thing that I worked on, they still are a thing.
Uh-huh.
So yes, I mean, if you look them up, you can see my memory of how state charts work. And the originator wasn't Amir Penwelli. It was David Orell. But they worked together a lot. It was Amir.
This is interesting that we found it because state charts is the standard UML diagram.
No, that's right. They incorporated them in UML. That's right. So state charts is one component. Like UML have all these different kinds of diagrams, and then they accepted state charts into them. I have no idea how that process worked, but the state charts that are now in UML are the ones that I worked on in the 1940s.
It is a GitHub project called State Charts. This is statecharts.dev, right?
Yeah. Well, there was a. So there was at one time a commercial product that was this kind of vast thing that had represented the state chart. It was represented on a database, and you could manipulate it visually. So you would kind of drop components onto it in the kind of way that we're familiar with.
What it was state chart a workflow engine, something like a workflow engine, or something like this?
Sorry, say again.
Was state chart something like a workflow engine?
No, it was designed. I mean, the basis of it is a state machine, finite state machine. So it's designed for complex systems, and they were using it, I think, for control systems. I'm pretty confident they were using it for something I would not cooperate with now, which is control systems on the Israeli aircraft industry's flight systems. So not now a very popular choice, but at that time didn't seem so controversial. So and these control systems would be based on finite state machines, but there would be events that could occur that could interrupt the behavior of the finite state machine and could move them to either to a different state or to a completely different area of the state chart. So you'd have different finite state machines, and events would make your state jump between them. So that was the idea of the state charts, and there was a fairly, as I remember, I haven't looked at them in a long time, but as I remember, there was a fairly sound mathematical basis to them.
So what it is, I had a contact with another system, so it was not used by me, but my colleagues. It was called, ASCII or ASCII. It was like it was used for real-time programming. So you could have a visual representation of real-time program, and it generated C code. And I show you this. This is give it to the chat, and this is called. I will put it in the show notes. It is called ASCII with C. And wait a sec, where is the chat? Do we have a chat at all? Yeah, but okay, this was an opposite of a workflow engine, because this was like, in a small, right? You use that to represent. Did it generate a code, or was it a runtime component in your case?
So I'm pretty confident it did generate code. I'm looking now to see what happened to the system I was talking about. It was called StateMate, and it appears that IBM bought it up because it was renamed IBM Rational StateMate, and it did indeed generate running code from the diagrams. So you worked with the diagrams. The basic idea was reactive systems. If you have systems that need to be that are control based, that are primarily driven by events, then this is a system for you, and it would generate the code for it.
Yeah, and Rational Rows was the UML tool, and this was the beginning.
Rational Rows worked with UML diagrams,
exactly,
with the UML class diagrams, and I think that it may well be that IBM wanted to bring StateMate as a component to describe the reactive.
Yeah, but because rows, you're right, there were class diagrams, but there are also use case diagrams, activity diagrams, and state transition diagrams, not state charts, state transitions. There was activity diagrams, which was, it was like method, and there was state transition, like the state was like a state machine. And back then I was also involved with MDA, model-driven architecture, which is similar. And what Rational Rows had and all the others, they had so-called MOF, was Meta Object Facility, and the MOF was the metadata. So all the diagrams, they stored the information in the MOF format, and you could read it and generate code, for instance. So I spent some time with that. So we generate class diagrams, but never flow, just the plumbing. So what we did, we generated classes, we generated XML, deployment diagrams, and yeah. Interesting. So we did similar things on different levels. Yeah, cool. So this was your visual experience, which worked, right? So on this ASCII, I know that it was used for real time by C programmers or ASCII, and I had a good experience with workflow. Like, this was just a limited amount of steps, and UI drawing also worked well back then. And right now it comes back. There are tools like Figma, which are visual, and it seems like it gets refined. There are many attempts until it works. So you spend the time in interested projects. So there was the where we already covered the what was it, social insurance project, right? Where
social insurance is right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I suppose so. When you've been around for as long as I have, even if you haven't done very much, very, very often, you're going to have accumulated some interesting experiences.
Yeah, we are both young. Java with the garbage collection keep us young. This is the unique experience.
Right.
Super cool. So, which other project? I'm just interested to know what are you doing, because I see you frequently on conferences. You're a nice guy, and I always thought myself, what he's actually doing. So this is why I wanted to have on the show, to reveal, are you a spy or whatever, like the Scottish, Highlander?
I'm underemployed at the moment, I would say. The work that I haven't had much consultancy work for a long time. I sort of thought I was going to get into performance, and I actually did learn quite a lot about performance. But I've never had a great deal of call for my services in talking about that. And so, a lot of the time I have actually I've relied on training, and I've been writing as well.
Which books you wrote? You wrote a lot of books.
Not a lot of books, no. A long time ago I wrote a book with Phil Wadler on. It was going to be a book about Java generics, but it turned out for various reasons that wasn't enough on its own, either for the authors or for the subject, and so the book ended up in two parts, a part on generics and a part on collections. So that came out a very long time ago for Java 5. But very recently, actually, like today, I have to put the absolute finishing touches to a second edition.
Wow!
Which will, literally today. It's due in tomorrow, which will be out in a couple of weeks, I guess. So the second edition has turned out to be quite a lot of work, and that's actually occupied me for a significant amount of time recently. In between those, I wrote a book on for Java 8 on. It was going to be on lambdas, but it ended up being on lambdas and mainly on streams. So it's one of the I think it's one of the better books on Java streams.
I think I have both of the books, not the second edition, because I like Java books, and whatever is a cool book, I always buy it.
You must have an awful lot of them.
I have, I think, hundreds of Java books.
Yeah.
So I at the beginning I bought everything. Now I'm a little bit cautious because there are also books which are really pointless. Unfortunately, at the beginning you can buy whatever, and always So my experience is, if you read a book, you always learn something. Maybe not much, but at least you get a different perspective or whatever. So this is why my experience, it is always worth to read a book, because I get lots of questions. Someone asks me, should I read books to learn programming? And my answer is, why not? This is not like it is not like just only read books, but if you have time, read books. This is just fun. No one asked me, should I watch Netflix? If you watch, this is your time, right? But if you can read books, they are free almost, right? Yeah. So I would say go to library or whatever and read the book, and because I would say learning is fun, right? If you keep learning, it is just the entire life is more fun. And if you just do something to know it and then forget it afterwards, I cannot imagine that. This is far less fun. So life should be fun, and reading books is fun. So I'm really curious about next book. So unfortunately, I forgot about the books. So now we advertise the books. And what it also means for you, Maurice, I have to invite you back, of course. I would like to talk the entire time about lambdas, for instance. Lambdas and streams, because what I wanted to do is really to take a look at the implementation of the streams. What happens inside, because this is a black magic inside the stream.
It is black magic. At the time that I was writing about them, I thought I really ought to fully understand them. in order not because not because it's important in a practical sense for the users of streams, but because you really shouldn't be writing about them without understanding them fully. And at the time, I never did understand them fully.
Yeah, but at least a little bit, right? So
a little, a little bit.
Yeah,
not in the way that I think I should have understood them. So maybe if I'm going to talk about them, I need to go back and read that code again. This
and we don't have to to be a low level conversation about streams and lambdas. More like higher level, just to what it means. And I would say with Java, if you use streams and use lambdas, it is actually a beautiful language. So you can do a lot with a little code. And,
yes,
and if you're accustomed to it, it is very readable. So at the beginning, it is strange, especially with method references, because you say, what is this? But if you did it a couple of times, it is actually... So maybe, so as cliffhanger, what I do a lot is, for instance, if I have a stream, right? Stream of strings, and then let's say filter, map, and whatever. So I tend to use a lot of method references. So I created methods, there's the logic, and in the stream just calls the method references. And then it is readable, and I can easily debug. I can have my breakpoints or whatever. And what I see a lot in projects, developers tend to write a lot of code inside the map method of a stream, for instance. And for me, it is hard to read. So I don't like that. So I don't like to have a multi-line code blocks somewhere in the stream. What I like is just to have more methods. And this is my way, but it works well for me, and I can read the code easily. So is this also your way of coding, or?
I think that the idea of lambdas that occupy more than a couple of lines at most is not a good idea. And like you, I'm pretty enthusiastic about method references, and they are difficult in the first place to get your mind around. And then when you're used to them, it's like anything else. I mean, like everything looks unfamiliar until it isn't.
Yeah.
And method references are very concise and elegant way, I think, of describing things. I've actually I suppose this is only a matter of notation, but when people are talking in the latest edition of the generics and collections book, I've changed every time I talk about a method. I don't any longer talk about the method by reference to the class.method name. I now use class:\method name.
Yeah.
Because I think this is the way now that I think about methods. And it's a nice abstraction.
And this is more correct, because if you say class dot, it implies a static method, right?
It does.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is more generic. So it could be whatever. It's just this is more a precise way of expressing the method.
Yeah.
What was your new edition is also about generics?
I revised both halves of the book, and it turned out actually I had to revise the generics part. I didn't have to revise the generics part because the content had changed that much, but the presentation had changed more than I expected. And Phil wrote the generics part, but he wasn't interested in getting involved in writing the second edition. So I got my hands on the first part, and this time I looked at.
He was not interested, so why not?
Well, he's somewhere else. Phil is he's. To write this book was a bit of a diversion for him anyway. I mean, he's a theoretical computing scientist.
Oh, okay.
So it turns out that he's actually a pretty good programmer as well. I was pretty surprised about how well he did. You don't normally think about theoretical computing science academics being much good at practical programming, but he wasn't bad. But on the other hand, going back and looking at it again, I thought, actually, I know how to explain this better.
Okay, very good.
And also, the idioms of the language have altered a lot more than I'd have expected in 15 years. So, for example, a lot of his examples were about we're using constructors for the wrapper classes. So, like new integer. I mean, there's plenty.
Integer, parse value.
Plenty of ideas about how you would improve the integer constructors. So, like that code now looks quite outdated, and I had to replace all of that.
This is what is the name of the book? The title?
It's Java Generics and Collections.
And the publisher?
O'Reilly.
Very good. And is can we order it right now?
Yes, you can order it on Amazon. Yes, I mean, and probably you can order it from O'Reilly. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty.
I can't remember when they said it was coming out. I think they said it was coming out even later than it actually has done. This is a book that's been on the runway for
Now
a
I'm
very.
curious. I'm curious whether you are the author of the book, not an AI. What is PECS? PECE.
Oh, that's producer extents
Consumer super.
Consumer super.
Yeah, perfect. So now you are Morris, okay? Because this is like very good. So actually, really, I would like to invite you back and talk about generics, just basics. We never had this on the podcast, and it's a good refresher. I have to admit, I don't use generics a lot, but if I have to, I use them. But it's not like I'm a generics fanboy. It's just they are there, and I use them. But
you don't need to be a fanboy. I mean, like, it's just.
But there are people. So I did lots of code reviews. There are people who love generics, so it looks like almost like Scala, than the Java code then. So generics and lambdas is also interesting. It's also a controversial topic, and maybe even a little bit performance. I don't care about performance. Not care. I care about performance, but it was always fast enough. So we never had, to get rid of streams in favor of for loop or whatever. But for loop is faster, but it doesn't matter in my enterprise projects. So what are, I would say, you wrote the book, the second edition. What were the biggest changes in the book? So where you spend the most time on in the book?
I spent a lot of time. Actually, I spent an awful lot of time on the much more than I expected on the generics half. Rewriting the explanations, because I actually thought the sequence of Phil's explanations weren't that great, and in particular something. I mean, a kind of basic, a basic fact about generics, which is like, what does query extends something mean? Really was not as clearly explained in there, and I think experience has shown that a lot of people really just don't understand. What a bounded wildcard means. That it represents some fixed but unknown type, and that gives a lot of problems. And so I spent a lot of time working out how to explain that, which I think came out better. The other thing, of course, was sequence collections. So that was the collections half of the book. Sequence collections was like the driver, which led to there being a second edition, because that's actually the biggest change in the collections framework that there's been for some time.
So from the refactoring is huge, but from usage perspective, it's just nice. Yeah, I can say get first, get last is like.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it really puts the various. It's something unusual in the collections framework, because it kind of makes the diagram more complicated, because it collects together. It makes class diagram more complicated because it collects together classes and interfaces that aren't otherwise related. Mm-hmm. So, like DEC doesn't have a great deal in common with linked hash set, but both of them do have this quite this set of properties. It's like we've looked at this quite large area of different things, and we've seen, there's something here, and then there's something in this other place, and there's this third thing, and they've got something in common, even though they were not originally exactly designed to have that thing in common. They don't have the common inheritance, but actually it's a new abstraction which covers these things. So it's interesting from that point of view.
And have you also covered a bit gatherers, or was it too early?
It's too early. It's too early. And gatherers is that would be for a new edition of the Streams book rather than for this one.
Yeah. Okay.
This one will go into a third edition. If I don't think it will, but I'm joking. But Valhalla would be a reason for it, because that's going to affect generics in particular, but collections as well, a great deal.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now about, it was a surprising, how to call it, context switch for me, because it's really interesting. So, and the Java collections are surprising. For instance, NavigableMap, right? For instance, this is almost a database. This is crazy. So with that, you can create a small database. So you can sort keys. This is like only with NavigableMap is already interesting, right?
People really that's a really underappreciated data structure. People often don't even know about it. You tell them about what it can do, and they say, "Oh, that's really useful. Why didn't I know about it?"
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, okay, Maurice, it's your fault. I have to re-invite you back, and we have to talk about the collections and generics. For me, a refresher, and because I just use them, but I didn't look at as you so deeply, so I would just ask questions to try to learn.
Okay.
And I will order your book right now, but it didn't arrive until the next conversation because I will try to invite you tomorrow. But and I hope that the audience will also order the book right now. But I think it will be.
Amazon is saying that it will be released on June the 30th.
So, then everyone who listens to the podcast order the book right now, and
yes,
our conversation, the next episode, they already know the basics, and the podcast will be like the extension of the book, the official extension of the book.
Okay, right. So it's a precondition before you're allowed to listen to this podcast that you must have bought the book.
We can encrypt it with a key, which is stored in the book, the podcast. This would be cool, right? So we are speaking, cool. And we this would be actually cool gag, right? So we have an LLM enhanced podcast. We speak, some alien language, and only with the key in the book. We speak, English again. So this would be actually a cool hack.
That would be a first.
Yeah. Where people can find you on the internet and the book, of course.
Well, they can find the book. It's just Java generics and collections. Mm-hmm. That's quite easy. I don't have much of an internet.
How many pages?
300. I think it's gone up to about 350.
This is manageable, actually.
Yeah.
Back then, the books has to be thick. So I also wrote a couple of books, and the publishers told me your book is too thin. It was like, yeah, but I mean, what I can do, right? And they wanted to have thick books in order to have more space on the shelf. So this was a thing back then. Really? And what I did, I self-published the last books, and they were really thin. I wanted to write the thinnest available books about a topic. And this is harder than you think, just to express, the precisely what. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well, the things have turned around now. The first edition was not much more than 250 pages, and I said 350 for this one, and it's I was bumping up against it, and the publisher said no, that's just that you can't go over 350.
Oh, very good. This is new.
Pardon?
My publishers told me, it has to be thicker. It doesn't look serious if it's a thick book. I was like, yeah, but come on. I mean, who reads such a thick books, right? So, yeah, pretty cool. So I'm already looking forward to the conversations about generics and streams or whatever, and PECS, of course. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be on here and talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure also here. Are you actually from? You're really a Scottish? How to call it? Scottish man, or how to call it?
Well, if you call it a Scotsman, I hesitate to call myself a Scotsman because that has an implication of like ethnic origin. But okay. But I do regard myself as Scottish now.
Scottish, okay. And are you speaking with me with a Scottish accent, or is it like?
I'm afraid not. I've been here for more than half my life, which is, as you can see, is a very long time. But I've never managed to acquire the accent. Maybe I should take lessons, elocution lessons.
Okay, can you? Okay, how it would sound Scottish? So,
well, you sound like this a bit. There's a kind of lilt to the voice which I simply can't imitate.
Okay,
as you can tell.
Perfect. Thank you a lot, and see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you very much, Adam.